welcome. It's one of those days I walked in and said happy Monday when I walked in, so clearly you can see where my brain is today. Sorry about that. But I'm really excited. I think this will be a lot of fun. I don't know, does everyone know everyone in the room? Well, and you don't know everyone, so let's go ahead, since a lot of you know each other, but let's still go ahead and do intros. Well, wonderful, thank you for your intros. I'm excited to start. Zoom people, we are back. I shouldn't call you Zoom people, that's terrible. Rise members joining us virtually, we are coming back to you. Well, I'm just so excited to talk about this topic because it's a topic that you would think as a former teacher would be really easy for me. You know, it's the topic, do you guys know what the topic for the thing? So every month we have a theme, and this month's theme is, do you want to say it? Or you ask it? She's like, no, the people side of business. So February is all about the people side of business. And like I said, you would think as a teacher, you know, I've dealt with people all the time, but I have found the people side of business the hardest part for me. And I've made every mistake known to man. So I'm just really excited to talk to someone who is an expert, in my opinion, on this. And we had the best conversation yesterday, just kind of getting prepared. And I was like, whoo, you guys are in for a treat. So I'm so excited you guys are here. As we like to begin here, we like to do first job and current job instead of reading her very impressive bio on LinkedIn. Speaking of LinkedIn, Celeste, I would encourage all of you to go to LinkedIn and do some reading. So I'm going to turn it over to Margie to hear your first job and your current job. And here you are. Yes.
My first job was a cat sitter for a lady.
I love this question for that reason.
A neighbor down the street, and I kid you not, I sat her cat for like 2 weeks, and I went over to her house at the end of it, and she gave me a envelope filled with coins that probably totaled to like 75 cents for all of my time. So
that's an awesome first job.
I know.
Anyone else cats? Yeah. Any other former cat sitters?
Winning start to my career.
Hey, but you came a long way.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you currently have a company, but before the company that you have now, you did what?
Yeah. I was a nonprofit executive managing 2 national nonprofit organizations, one in the housing bucket, the other in the education bucket. And then I made a pivot in March of 2020, great timing, to open my own leadership coaching and consulting practice.
Ooh, did you open it on Friday the 13th?
I did not.
13th.
Yeah.
But March, yes.
Yeah.
And she got her office here in November. Yes. And your company's name is?
It's the Thirlby company. It's not very original, but I really wanted to just keep it that way. And it's a very special old family name that means a lot to me. So,
and tell the audience kind of what you do with your company.
Yeah, so my company is called officially the Thirlby Company Coaching and Consulting. So on one side, I do life and leadership coaching, both with groups and individuals. And on the other side, I do consulting for nonprofits and businesses. And on the consulting side, I'm really focused on empowering leaders to step into their full potential and become more effective managers and leaders on their teams. I help with leadership transitions for nonprofits. I served a few interim CEO roles during the pandemic, which was there was a lot of transitions at nonprofits. And then I also do training surrounding relationship building, communication, conflict, and teamwork.
Yeah. So are you guys surprised in any way that I picked her for the people, or that we picked her for the people side of business? Well, and yesterday when we were talking, getting ready for this call, and you know, we were talking about the idea of the people side of business, there's so many different aspects of that, right? You know, when I think about the people side of business, I think about the customers, or clients, you know, however you want to call it. You know, I think about the employees, which has been the thing that I have had the joy to learn and get better at. And then, you know, I also think about it a lot in terms of emotional intelligence, you know, and especially as we're navigating, we're all collectively experiencing trauma with COVID, right? So those are the 3 things we're going to focus on today in terms of the people side of business. But if, you know, when you hear that phrase, you're kind of thinking about it from another avenue, please don't hesitate towards the end to kind of pick on Margie a little bit and get some questions going. So let's dive into the client side. You want to start with the client side or the staff side?
Clients maybe.
Okay, so let's start with the client side. So, you know, how do you really, you know, what do you think about, or how do you help your companies or nonprofits on the client side on really, you know, having a focus on the people?
Yeah, well, I think that relationships are everything. With your friends, your relationships, who you work with, the success of your business, relationships anchor you. And if you don't have strong relationships, you can't be a successful leader or business owner. It's just the truth. The same with being a manager of people. And so I reflected yesterday and kind of if I could think of 3 keys to building relationships, whether you are building it with clients you work with as a business owner or on your team, or for me as a former nonprofit executive with sponsors, corporate partners of ours, community partners. The first is that you need to make people feel appreciated. And I know that sounds obvious, but a lot of people really, really miss that boat. Yeah. When I work with nonprofits, what I do every year is I make charitable donations to all of them. And I literally do it as I want to give back to the companies I work with, but I want to see what it feels like to be a donor. Do I get a thank you call? Do I get an email? You'd be amazed how many don't. And that invites a really honest conversation about how you expect your donors to keep on giving if you don't even take the time to thank them. Right?
It kind of reminds me of like a secret shopper in a way.
Totally.
Like,
it's amazing.
Right?
Yeah, but you need to make them feel appreciated. And that's with little and intentional effort. So on the little side, it's simply an immediate thank you after your first meeting, saying, hey, I'd really like to connect with you today. And I just wanted to wish you a good week. Takes 2 seconds to do. The other is more intentional efforts, which I'm trying to focus on this year because I'm not really very organized at executing certain tasks. That's one of my growth areas. And so I'm putting efforts into my brand, my business cards, really nice stationery that I bought. Please send thank you notes. I cannot tell you how much that sets you apart as a leader. Just a quick thank you note to let someone you met with them. It's really, really thoughtful.
I agree.
And then swag, I'm working with a friend of mine who does customized branding. So I'm doing little, the plant seeds and straws and journals and things that I'm going to send to my clients just to let them know that I care about them.
Well, it sounds like you're being really intentional and systematizing it,
Right.
just like anything else. And actually, so at Rise, for the staff, we have a book club. And every month we read or every quarter we read a book. And the book this time, which I highly recommend, is all about this. It's called Never Lose a Customer.
Never Lose a Customer Again.
Oh, yes, I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the author, do you know it off the top of your head?
No.
Okay. But no, that book is so good about talking about this topic, about how to surprise and delight your clients and these small things that, when you're in the day in, day out chaos, we all understandably forget. And you're right, it does make a big difference. I'm glad you're bringing that up.
And it's key to make people feel appreciated and make those efforts when it's not at a business transaction. So hearing from them halfway through the year, just saying, hey, we appreciate you. It's not, hey, we appreciate you. And by the way, do you want to work with me again this year? Those should be separate ideally, so that when you do that ask, whether it's nonprofit, corporate, it feels really authentic because you've invested in the relationship. There's a data point in the nonprofit sector that a donor should receive 6 touch points for every financial ask from you.
Well, and I think that's true in sales too.
Totally.
Like just from a
different
fancy
industry.
sales girl, is it 7? I feel like it's something you should be touching them.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds kind of creepy, but you know what I mean.
I think yes. I think when you say never lose a customer again, you can also apply that to your team. Right?
Totally.
But Betsy, you're getting us ahead. We're going to talk about team next.
But what, Stacey, yes, to your point. And one thing I've learned recently, and Trish last time talked about this too, adding value. Like not just saying, when can we meet again? I'd love to reconnect, but like something, an article you think, or a book you read.
I love it.
Well, and I know Beth will appreciate this, but something that sets you apart with the clients that you're really trying to do more of, and I haven't seen a lot of people doing it. It takes that extra step. It's just like
And they talk about that in that book. They talk about just doing like a quick video.
Yeah, just a thank you, right? Instead of just an email, you're just, here, shot this quick little 2-minute video, and it's just thanking them, it's your personality.
No, I love that. Okay, so that was your first one.
First one. Second one is, does anybody know what Oprah said on the last day of her show, the number one thing that she learned from all of the people she interviewed?
Oh my God, I'm so excited to hear this.
Number one thing she's learned in life as a leader.
Sounds like it's
What is the number one human need?
Shelter?
Belonging.
Is to feel heard.
Yeah.
People at the end of the day just want to feel heard. So
That's
you
the
need
number
to
one.
make your customers feel heard. That could literally be if I have a call with CEO and working on a project and he or she just says, hey, I'm having the worst day. I'm so sorry. You're in a really tough spot right now with your company. What can I do to support you? People just want to feel heard and validated. And we forget that little piece so much. And it doesn't mean that you agree or disagree with that person and their feelings. It just means that you hear them as a human. And then the third is just showing care for the relationship. and in that investment in that person and their potential. So that goes back to appreciation. But, you know, one of my company values is related to people over profit. Like I always put people first. You know, I had a client, it's a great story. He messaged me on his birthday to say it's my birthday today, and I just am having the worst day. And we had technically finished our coaching engagement at this point. I don't care if I'm like on the clock or being paid. This guy is hurting on his birthday, and I wanted to let him know. So I sent him a card in the mail just to say, hey, you got this. Like, I'm here to support you. So people want to feel that care. And then the fourth one is to have fun and be relatable. I do data analysis because I'm nerdy on my exit, but it's all related to people. It's all related to people.
I love it.
People data.
I love that you have both the soft and strong, meaning like
Yeah.
you have the fluff, but you're not so fluffy. You have the
Exactly,
data to back
but
up.
I do exit surveys with my coaching clients, and I like synthesize like what are the 3 most important things they say about why it was a good fit for them. And the number one thing that comes up is you're relatable. Like, so I'm not afraid to share with my clients about my challenges, or just be a goofball, or have fun and not take myself seriously. So people want to work with people they can relate to. At the end of the day, when you're working on a project, people want to have fun with you. So have fun with your clients and be relatable.
Well, what I think is so awesome is those are all tips that, don't misunderstand this, but like when you first hear, you're like, this is not rocket science. Like I've heard this, but like but I'm not saying that to discredit what she's saying. I'm saying it because I'm so thankful you're saying it, and you're saying it in a way that's like, yes, I get this. And yet, I don't know about you guys, but I definitely forget that stuff. It's like I understand it, and it makes complete sense, and it almost sounds simple in a way. Don't misunderstand me. I'm like, this is coming off right.
Simple doesn't not be difficult.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, I like
There
that.
you go.
Yes, it's
There you
simple, but it's not difficult.
Yeah.
But I think just having it on the forefront of our brain and saying like, I'm gonna pick this 1 out of 4 and really make this my thing for 2022.
I really appreciate you acknowledging that, because I do strengths-based leadership with my clients, if you're familiar with the Strengths Finder assessment. And something I want to underscore here is that relationship building is by far my leading strength compared to the other domains, right? Executing is last, which is why I talked about systems for cards and appreciation. But if relationship building does not come as naturally to you, that is okay. You have beautiful strengths and gifts that you have to share with this world. But my guidance for you is that you need to create intentional systems to cue you to make these efforts. These things come really, really naturally to me because they're my gift. Versus other things in my business like strategic planning, executing, I need a lot of support. So I have to create intentional systems in my schedule to do those tasks. So just know, like, don't feel bad if this doesn't come as naturally to you. It's just about practicing it and cueing yourself and creating accountability to do these things.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we talked about customers.
Yeah.
The list, I'm like wishing someone take notes for me. Betsy's taking notes for me. But let's switch over to the staffing side of the team, because that's definitely been a journey for me. Again, you would think as a teacher, being a manager of staff would be so easy. And I don't know why I struggled so much. I think actually I do. I am a super doer, and I just know how to get stuff done. And letting go of control of my baby and training and teaching others to try to do what I did was really confusing and hard for me.
Yeah, I work with a lot of former educators and teachers, and they sometimes have the hardest time managing
So you'd
people.
think I would be great at it.
Well, you're used to a tremendous amount of autonomy in the classroom with lesson planning, decorating your classroom, and creating this beautiful space for yourself and your students. But when it comes to working on a team and managing people, it's totally different.
Yeah. So how do you help leaders be better about managing teams? And like, what are the lessons on the people side for that?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm super passionate about people management and looking at employee data surrounding employee engagement and staff retention. And management is definitely one of my strengths. And I always would look at our employee engagement surveys every year. Like, what are the patterns and themes that people say? You can look at other studies that talk about this with Gallup and their research. But I would say the 4 things that jump out to me. The first thing people say of like, why do you like working with Margie and this team? The number 1 theme that everyone mentions is Margie cares about me as a human being. People want to feel like you care about them. Like, it's not this transactional, you work for me at this desk and do this job. It's like, I want to know if you're okay. I care about you. I could care less about this deadline today. Like, your relative passed away this week. What do you need to be supportive? Like, we can figure out the rest, right? So you just want to know at the end of the day that you like worry about them, you care about them and their well-being.
I'm gonna pause you on that because there's a CEO in St. Louis of a company called Barry Waymiller. Never say that name. It's a huge company in St. Louis. His name's Bob Chapman. I would write this down. I was on a panel with him, and it was during the pandemic, and this is before Anna Marie, luckily. And it was the thing that really switched me over. He wrote a book, and I'm not gonna have the detail exactly, but it was basically like how to treat your people like family. Because what he said people come to work and spend more time at work than they do with their family. And how they feel at work impacts their family too, because then they go home pissed off, or, that's hard to separate it. And it finally clicked for me when he talked about that. So I think that goes to what you were saying. And it's such a good book by Bob Chapman.
Okay, noted.
Yeah.
The second, and this relates to Oprah again,
Not
is
that
that
Oprah.
employees want to feel like their voice matters. Like, what are you doing to ask them questions, ask for their feedback, have their voice at the table with strategic planning conversations? If people feel like their voice and their opinions don't matter, they're not going to want to work for you. So I make intentional efforts to get feedback, even when it's not part of my performance management of me as a staff, like sending out a 360 every year, or sitting down and doing one-on-ones, having office hours so that people feel their voices included. And you have to make it clear. There's times as a leader, you say, you know what, I'm making this decision. I know you don't agree with it. That's okay. Like, that's not the problem. The problem is when you don't create a culture of feedback, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, and the one piece to that, because I'm good at asking for opinions. And I'm good at bringing people along. Some feedback I've gotten. I have my degree in math, right? And in math, they tell you a lot of times to do something. This is so nerdy, but just hang with me for a moment. A lot of times in math, they tell you to prove a problem by proof by contradiction. You solve a really hard problem by taking the problem and looking at it from the opposite. And I learned after the feedback that a bad habit of mine is when someone gives an idea, instead of letting them feel heard, I start with the proof by contradiction. And so that I'm not, like, I'm asking their opinion, thinking I'm creating this environment. But I'm not, because they're feeling like all I do is slam them down, essentially.
Totally. And
I thought I was just being like interesting and having a dialogue, and that didn't work.
And we've all been there when somebody suggests an idea where we're like, no, that's going to be a nightmare. And you're thinking of it. But what you can do in that case, and we can talk about this later, but there's a power of asking what's called open-ended questions. Most people leave with what's called closed-ended question. Do, is, did,
why,
etc. Well, why is actually open-ended. So open-ended questions like why, how, what, who lead to more of a dialogue. So what you could say in that situation is, tell me more about why you think this will provide a positive impact to our team. Or what are the potential risks, pros and cons that you see from this path? And it allows that person to say, you know what, actually I haven't thought about that, and it's probably not a good decision. It's like letting the person, and then they don't feel as defeated, but you're still like owning your autonomy as a leader.
Totally. I like the phrase say more. I've been leaning into say
Tell me
more.
more about that.
Say more about that. I do
Yeah.
say it a lot. I just have a couple key phrases and then repeat it over and over.
Help me understand.
Help me understand.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
It's good. No, this is great. This is great. And then the third thing is to set really clear expectations up front. I know that sounds obvious, but a lot of people do not carve out time on the front end when they're building relationships or managing someone. So they just expect that the person's going to read the handbook, attend their onboarding, and be good to go. But it's really important that you establish relationship expectations in your working relationship. So I always carve out, I take people to a long lunch and I carve out a half day on their first day of work. And I sit down with them and just to get to know them as a human. And then I say, like, let's talk about our working relationship. What are you feeling excited about this job? Where are you feeling nervous? How do you like to receive feedback? Let's get really specific. What do you want me to tell you on the spot? Do you want me to send you an email? Do you want me to schedule a meeting? Where are you wanting to grow this year as a professional? Where do you want hands-on support versus off support? I really get to know that person, and then I let them know what they can expect to me. I let them know where they're going to feel challenged with me as a leader. Like, I'm super hands-off, and you kind of have to bug me if you want to meet with me, but I'm always available. That's just an example.
Versus them having to feel like, oh, the story they tell themselves is she doesn't care about what I'm doing.
Exactly. So then when you have to have the tough conversations and you have to hold people accountable, they're expecting it. You can say, remember when we met last month and I told you that you said you wanted feedback on the spot. That's what I'm giving you, right? It just creates that trust right from the beginning, because one conversation I was talking about with a client yesterday is having really tough conversations. It's hard to have them if there's not trust that's established with you and someone else. People shut down. They're not as open to your feedback if they don't think you have their best interest at heart.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
And you have one more you said. 'Cause I think you said
Yes.
four.
And then the fourth one is, this is critical for long-term employee retention, is opportunities for growth. So people want to feel like they want to grow while they're at your company and after they're at another business, right? And that should be really, really based on an employee's strengths. So it's paramount that you know the strengths of each of your employees. I highly recommend StrengthsFinder. It's a very old assessment, but I think it's really the best ultimately because it works. And there's incredible data around strengths. And I wrote down two. Employees who know and use their strengths are six times more likely to be engaged at work and almost 8% more productive at work. So,
I think that even because I know a lot of people in the audience and potentially listening don't have employees, but I think that can be very much translated into running your business.
Totally.
Like if you are in your role doing the role that you have, we said six
times more likely to be engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And what they mean by engaged is you're engaged, you're happy, you want to stay at the company. That's right, the goal. So if you're working with a client, it's important that you know what are your strengths, what are your gaps. You should be spending as much time as possible in what we call your zone of genius. That's by Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap. It's a great book if you haven't read it. And then you should delegate what's not in your zone of genius. And with your clients, you want to know their strengths right away. Where do I need to provide more support versus less support with you? In our work together.
So even if you're a business owner and you don't have staff, I think these tips are really still applicable because, you know, you try a mistake I made is me trying to do everything in every aspect, and finance is something I should never be near, you know? And the more I'm spending time on that, the less I'm doing the things that I'm really great at.
And that's going to provide the ROI to your business. That's
exactly. So I just want to make sure that even if you don't have employees, you can see that this is very, you know, what you're saying can be applied to a lot of different things.
And I have a question.
Say it really loud so the video people.
Oh yeah. Say more about like kind of managing your clients from that standpoint. Like I never thought to be like, where do you like how do you do that without, because I like to be the driver on the anticipatory one and being like, this is the service we give and here's how great it is. But I think it's, I feel like I'm shouting.
No, I was reading. So the people on Zoom with the Rice member on Zoom, she's asking about. So the Zoom, I'm terrible. I need to work on my. You knew I was going to be off today because we started the day with Happy Monday, so let's just own that. But no, Beth is asking about how to sort of parlay what she's saying about managing people over to managing the clients.
Like I just never thought about that because it's kind of different. You work for them, but you're also a business that's supposed to be the owner of it.
Yeah, and everything she said, I think could very much translate to clients. So I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah.
Great question, Beth. So I would say, let's use your example in working with me on a video.
Great.
Like we've signed
How
up
do I manage you a little bit?
we've signed up together to work with each other, and we're going to go on this journey of creating this beautiful product for my business. At the beginning, I would recommend getting to know me and saying like, while we're working together, what do you need the most from me? What is helpful for me? What are you good at versus what are you not? And let's say I think of that in the context of video production. I'm very clear on like who I am as a person, relationships. I'm not uncomfortable with speaking in front of the camera. Like I'm looking through this inventory on what might be on this punch list, but you know what? Like I'm really bad at staying organized and on task with projects. So what I might need from Beth is for her team to hold me accountable, have regular touch points, and make me feel more comfortable with some of the administrative sides of the video production.
I think it's so brilliant. It would make such a game changer.
Such a small tweak, but
oh my God, it's I thought we were gonna be down at 10 because we used to be down at 10. Thankfully, we're not. I got mental problems. Lori.
Just to follow up. Like,
Hi, good to see you.
Just to follow up. I love this with the idea of onboarding clients and then managing them. And so I'm thinking about kind of a process or a system when I start working with someone. And I'm wondering, you know, I don't have the luxury of, you know, a long lunch. And this is on video. And we've already had maybe a half hour kind of conversation to make sure we're the right fit. Is there, you know, processes you've seen that work really well for this, as opposed to maybe just a conversation, like maybe an intake form about strength?
So I'm gonna push so that people, because I swear that they're like not hearing and wondering what's going on. So Lori's talking about, and I think that you bring up a really good point. Thank you for for saying that is,
Yeah.
I think the people listening mainly are people that are gonna think how to take what you're saying to the customer. So I love that we're going that way. And when you can have a staff member lunch, so Laura's saying, you know, we as, you know, running a business don't necessarily have 2 hours to take someone, our client,
Totally.
to do what she's saying. So how can we condense what you're saying and make it manageable as a business owner to take the attention of what you're doing in a more targeted way?
Great question. So what I do, and I think this could be translatable, is I have an employee or a client onboarding form that I do. This is at least what I do with all my coaching clients, and it's a requirement. So after they've signed up to work with me, we've done invoicing, legal, that part of the agreement, then they fill out a form. And I ask them some really customer service centered questions towards the end of the form of, tell me what type of encouragement or accountability you will need to be successful on your journey. And I give examples like, I appreciate check-in emails or text or uplifting notes, or I like someone who really pushes me when I'm not following through, because everybody's very different. I have clients that are like textbook type A students that do all their work on time, show up on sessions, and other ones, they get on the call and they're like, I forgot to do my homework again. Right? So you have the two. And then I also ask them, what can I do to make your experience fantastic between now and the end of the project? You know, and then they give me that feedback. And when we have our very first real engagement, we go through that and we talk about it in detail so I can get to know them. Yeah.
I love that.
It's super easy, and it's like easy questions I use at the same time for everybody. And what's interesting is everybody answers those questions so different. I have one client who's like, I hate positive cheerleaders. I'm like, right, you're gonna hate working. But I'm like, okay, this woman like is really honest. She doesn't like rah-rah cheerful Margie. She wants like that tough love and accountability.
I love that.
And at the end of our engagement, she said, I know I told you I didn't like the rah-rah cheerleader, but I actually love that about you. So it's really cool like to see her learning.
You were able to give her what her need and still be true.
Well, if a type A is like on top of it and you're like knocking down their door, they might get very annoyed.
You know, I'm an adult. I know what I'm doing. Do
Like,
not
quit
sit there
asking me
behind
for,
her.
yeah, I know.
Now, I feel like the audience could ask tons and tons of questions, and I am gonna open it up, but again, I worry about the people on the Zoom, and there's one more thing that I need to, oh, sorry, Anna Marie, you wanna give me it?
No, I'll let you know.
Okay, cool. Anna Marie will let me know, and by the way, yeah, for people watching virtually, if you do have questions, put it in the chat, because Anna Marie is watching those and can make sure that your voice is heard as well, because we want you to feel heard, Oprah. But I do want to get through the last topic because I think it's just as an important topic, and I think it's very applicable whether you have staff, don't have staff, whatever it is. Emotional intelligence, I think, is really the key to your success in the people side of business. And the more effort I put on myself and growing in that area, the better I am with my customers, my business. So I don't want to run out of time and not hit on emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
talk to me about, you know, and that's a very, I mean, we could have a 3-day retreat on emotional intelligence. So it's a very broad topic. So I just am curious in terms of the people side of the business, what you want to dive into.
Totally. So first off, I really appreciate that you have this as a topic, because I think your emotional intelligence and your capacity for vulnerability is the most important foundation to being a successful leader. 100%. And you know, if you're a huge Brene Brown fan, #1 bestie, you know, there's even a quote in there.
I've tried to get her here, trust me.
Yeah.
I want to meet my girl.
Yeah, your capacity for leadership, she has some quote that says your capacity for leadership will always run in tandem to your capacity for vulnerability. So they have to go run hand in hand, right?
Well, and I push a little bit more, not just leadership.
Yeah.
When people ask me, you know, I want to start a business, I want to become an entrepreneur, what classes should I take? Well, I do think accounting 101 is important. I'm like, you need to go do self-work.
Yeah.
You need to go do
100%,
self-work and learn how to deal with vulnerability.
100%.
So I think it is leadership, but it also is just business-wise. You want to start a business, work on your vulnerability.
Yep, absolutely. And then the other thing is, with the result of the pandemic, you know, we're finally starting to have enough data to look at with employee retention and engagement, and what we've seen over this time with what people are calling the great resignation, right? And why employees are leaving their companies and what's happening with that. And Gallup did a very impressive study on this that talks about the difference between what we used to see as burnout of employees who just aren't happy, don't like their jobs, they're not doing well, versus the burnout of really happy high performers. And the study was all about the data that they saw at the beginning of 2021, is in March, and then they collected numbers in October. And happy employees went from like 60% turnover to 30%, something crazy. And so what they saw was that the lower the well-being of your team is, the the more likely you are to leave the job. And when I say well-being, I mean mental, emotional, physical health. I don't mean like, oh, do I like the project I'm working on? Am I happy? Do I feel psychological safety at the workplace? Do we have retreats, workshops, things to fill your buckets, healthy work-life balance, flexible leave, the things that we know are proven to make people happy and stay at work. And then the other big study finding was the turnover has a huge financial cost to the bottom line of the business. So of course, if you have all these high-performing employees leaving, your business is going to be hurt, your ROI, your productivity. So we have to pay attention to the emotional well-being. And I have found in all of my work with every client I've worked with, number one indicator is leadership. And what I mean by that is if your leadership is not vulnerable, if they are not on board for well-being and talking about their feelings and doing retreats, the staff doesn't have it too. So I work a lot of times in leadership coaching with these clients who are like, my boss is always in a bad mood. They won't talk to me. I don't feel safe talking to them about my problems. Well, how do you expect your company to function?
Right.
So it's critical.
Well, and I think a lot of people listening don't necessarily have employees,
Right.
but yet I think that mental and emotional well-being is just as important because you can't function and get a shoe company off the ground or grow your video company or any of the things and wear all the hats. So what do you do to help your leaders have that emotional well-being? Because I think, I don't know about any of you guys, but I'm really good at putting myself last. And until it's too late, until I've pissed off an employee. And because what I found after getting feedback 3 or 4 times doing this, when my emotional well-being drops, I become like a robot. I can function and show up, and most people don't know, but then my ability to connect and be human goes away.
Totally.
And then I hyperfixate, Anna Marie's never experienced that, on things like, you know, the coffee mugs being aligned, or like no coffee stains, you know, the things, these like very minutiae things that are important, don't misunderstand me. But it's because my life feels out of control, so I'm holding on to the things that I can't control. And then you accidentally are pissing people off around you, and it's defeating the purpose. So I'm trying to be better about, like, if I get to that place where that's where I am functioning, trying to shepherd that impact.
Totally. So a few things just to think about you and your wholeness as a leader and a human. I wholeheartedly recommend coaching and counseling. I recommend counseling to all my clients I work with, and it's not silly. I see a counselor every other week, and it's not because some event happened in my life. It's because I'm a human being and I need the support. The second is working with a coach, which is very, for those of you that are newer to the coaching concept, it's focused more on outcomes and goals. So different than a counseling conversation, a coach will say, where do you want to be 6 months from now, a year from now? What do you want your life to look like? And then you carve out a path to get there and you partner to your success. So I cannot recommend enough coaching. And then finding ways to fill your bucket that align with who you authentically are. Get out the shoulds from around you of what our culture says self-care and wellness means. You have to ask yourself what makes me feel happy. So whether that's exercise, movement, having a support group that you can meet with. I'm starting a mini mastermind with a few women that I've connected with on Instagram around the country, and we're just going to make it like a monthly support each other as women gathering, right? So make sure you have a community that also can support you.
And what I'm hearing you say, and be intentional about it, because when you're in that place of just survival and you don't have those systems, you're like, well, what do I do? I'm just going to keep going. So for the sake of time, I do want to open up the floor. I got through all the things I wanted to get through, unless you had another point in emotional intelligence.
I would say
I want to make sure I
also,
get
you know, I want to be respectful that finances and time can be a challenge for a lot of people. So there are also free resources that you can pursue, whether it's incredible podcasts, books, free workshops, the library, where you can be in a state of learning and continuous growth and improvement for yourself that don't cost you anything as well. So I like doing both.
I like that.
Yeah.
But I can't resist a plug for Rice Digital.
No, totally.
You know, because every program we have, we video it, right? And so our members are mind blowing. And so I've heard a couple members say, like, I'm on a walk and I just listened to the previous thing that I missed. So I think that's great. Anna Marie, did anyone in the chat ask a question? That question. Celeste, you and Betsy, one of you go, because I know you both had a question. I don't care who goes first. I don't want to play favorites.
I think not a question, was a statement.
Okay.
So after 19 years in corporate and never once having this structure of a leader or a leader within the company. I mean, everything is always walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
It's interesting because of having PTSD, which is why I refuse to go back right now. But from a client-facing perspective, I think my partner and I become choosy about some of the clients we want to work with. So, like Betsy, I spend a lot of time doing business development, relationship management, and I get really disheartened by the number of companies who are still stuck in that of people.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do this every day. Like, no, we don't do that. We don't invest in our people. No training. So I like teeter on this, having hope for the future that companies are embracing training, leadership, and the whole person, but still seeing so many companies run by, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Kind of this.
Yeah. And so for those of you who can't hear, Celeste is just commenting on that, the whole, what you're describing is amazing. And it would be incredible if more and more leaders are doing it. Sadly, Celeste is seeing quite a few companies not yet ready to do that. And I don't disagree, but I also have hope. COVID has sucked, let's just be honest, but I think it's forcing the hand of a lot of companies that would take eons to get there. I think they're starting to get there faster. I don't think all of them, don't misunderstand me. I think you're 100% right, Celeste, but I do think that's one positive, in my opinion, that's coming from it. And so I think that's a good comment.
And I've had to have this mindset shift of trying to want to educate and change these
Yeah.
companies, and then realizing it's not their time and it's
Right.
not my place.
No.
Yep, energy management, so important.
And that's been hard, but it goes back to, we also try to align with clients who are embracing those values
Yeah.
and doing those things.
Totally.
Smart.
That feel good, right? We walked away from it.
Yes.
I think it's really
And
smart.
that's okay, because you also are not showing up as your best self with those clients when you're in that stressful, misaligned relationship. So you're doing a disservice to yourself and them by staying in the relationship. And it's so important to know who. My business coach had this activity. We did my ideal client avatar, and we designed it, and we got really, really specific on like their pain points, their emotions, their demographics, all these things, right? And if you know that and you have good marketing language around that, with a beautiful marketing video to show you will attract those clients that align with that growth area.
But, you know, I'm glad you said that, and I don't disagree with you. And I've worked with a lot of our members and myself. It's like, you know that, but when you're newer and you're anxious, I mean,
Yeah.
look, Rice has been around since 2017. It wasn't until, when was that? Last year, probably like 6 to 8 months ago,
October.
I finally got to that place where I would own exactly who we are and who we aren't.
Yeah.
And it was because I had done a misalignment enough, so with great people, I like them, but because we were misaligned, they didn't love or experience the joy of Rise because we weren't the right fit for them. And so I needed to stop trying to attract
That's
them.
okay.
And it took me till last year,
Yeah.
right? So I don't disagree with you, but I just want to honor how hard it is, because I know when you're beginning, it's like, well, I just need business. It's that grabby, desperate
Yeah.
thing.
Well, and those people are they need you the most, the ones that are
I know.
I can fix you the most, you're the one,
Well, and
people need to want help.
Well, and it's scary. Well, it's scary because it's like, well, if I get really focused, maybe I can't find this client, and maybe my business won't run. And I had to get to the point last whatever that I was like, well, if I can't find them, that just means I shouldn't do my business.
Right,
And I'm not
right.
saying I want that. I'm just saying, like, I had to get to that confident place to say, like, if it
Yeah.
fails because I'm attracting the people I believe Rise is best for, then it fails, and that's
such a
okay.
good point. And I should have said, you don't need to know that right away. I actually really pushed against it. I said, nope, I'm going to go through at least one full year of business before I start looking at that information and carving that path.
Yeah.
And it's actually after year 2 that I've gone down this process.
Yeah.
Now
2
I've
versus
had,
5 is
now
great.
I've had this like large group of clients that I've worked with, and I'm able to say, what have been my brightest memories, projects, and people I've worked with over the last 2 years? What do they have in common, and why is that? Why do I feel so much joy when I work with this client?
Totally.
It's because of this. Now I have the information to have an informed decision as opposed to shooting from the hip, because I also work with really diverse group of clients. My coaching clients range from 25 to 60 years old, and I work with men and women of all walks of life and careers, and that's something that's really important to company as a business value. So I'm not gonna get that
Totally.
narrow, but they all do have similar pain points,
There's a through line.
values. There's a through line.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's,
I just wanted to add on the end of my resource.
Yeah.
When I first left corporate, I didn't know what I was doing, so I was helping women basically like find their next path. Well, what I did was pay for them to take balance strength
oh,
as part of the package. So I think it's only $50
Yes.
for the 5.
Yeah.
So if anybody is in coaching and you have a long-term client, that may be worth $15 to then get that data to then be
Smart.
able to realize like what they're
That's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah.
Betsy, and then I'm not gonna forget about you. Go ahead.
In this data heavy world, how do you feel about, I think there's tension between understanding, well, I tend to believe people make decisions emotionally justified with data.
So
That's right.
But talk to me about this whole, like, I have a boss who just thinks everyone makes decisions in a database.
Hold on, before she answers it, Betsy asked a really good question that my husband and I debate a lot about because he believes a lot about quantitative data, and I believe a lot about qualitative data. And so what Betsy's asking is, in the world of data, how do people make those decisions, and how do you navigate that when somebody is what I'm hearing, Betsy, is when someone is very quantitative data based, how do you navigate that? Because in my opinion, that can sometimes be misleading. Just having quantitative data is misleading. Do you ping on with that? Or,
I can kind of.
well, let's hear what she has to say. Yeah, but then,
Yeah, so I really believe in values-based leadership and decision-making across the board for everything, whether you're a company making a business decision or you're an individual making a life decision. So I believe that every business decision should be made rooted in your company values. And you could call that emotions. Maybe your emotions are what fuels the values or get bought into them, but ultimately values are values. And if they're in writing, they're a pretty tangible way to inform your decision making.
For sure.
So that's kind of my first take on that. And then I think there should be a balance between the data and the emotions, which connect to the values ultimately. So finding a balance. My last nonprofit, it was very challenging. Data drive decisions was one of their core values. And we were so data heavy that we were not even having conversations with our schools and our principals and our parents and our students to make the decisions. Like, I would rather know what they want in our partnership and the service to their students than what is like Salesforce say, right? So you really do, that goes back to the people side of this.
yeah. Well, and the
letting
qualitative
relationships fuel your decision making. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I really believe in a balanced approach.
Well, and
takeaway is, we'll look at their mission statement.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. What
Yeah.
matters to
Can
them?
I add something?
Yeah,
to this?
please,
So-
yeah.
So my husband's an engineer, so
Okay.
we have a lot, and I'm like,
I
the
heard.
theater,
I'm not
yeah,
thinking.
that's how I don't know how we did it, but, so we've had a lot of conversations over our 20+ years together, and what I've realized is that a lot of times what we end up having to do is like, yeah, there's data, but where did that data come from? What are the assumptions that we're making? Because there's always.
Yeah, you can always get
assumptions that-
data regardless, it just might not be
Right.
accurate data.
So what were the assumptions? Who did that data come from? So like sometimes we argue about things and I'll be like, okay, let's go back and look at where this data came from. Like, what is the study? What is who got this data?
And is this
Who
the
did
right
they
data
go to?
points?
Right, and so
Yeah.
then by starting to like go through those, I'm like, well, look at this, it's 70% men versus women, or
Yeah.
it's,
Yes.
this is the question that they asked in order to get that.
That's
Supposed-
information.
Yeah,
You know,
and is that the right
Data's
question?
subjective too, yeah.
Is that the question we're answering when we're
Right.
trying to
Yes.
use that data? So like, we end up trying to go back. Like,
Well, and it's
And
kind of to
look
her
for
point of
that,
stepping
right.
back and asking those more open-ended questions. I
right,
mean, she
like,
said something
how
earlier
did
about
this
that.
you think this data is telling you something, but how did it get there?
Ooh, I think that's so brilliant. It's so helpful.
And that leads to sometimes more of the value conversations with
Yes.
a data-driven person.
Yes.
Because
Oh,
then
that's
you're
cool.
looking at how they got to that data.
Thank you for sharing that. Hold on, I worry about time, guys. All of these are amazing conversations and you should have these afterwards. We just have a short amount of time and I just want to get through one more question and then y'all sit and have these conversations. But I just want to be respectful. The conversation's amazing and I want the conversation to keep going on. I just want to be respectful for people who can't hear it. It's annoying if I'm being honest. Now, you're not annoying. The conversation, if you can't hear it, is frustrating. So Lori.
Okay, the ideal client conversation,
Yeah.
just to go back to that for a moment, and to echo, I've had my business for 4 years, and I have probably in the last year really figured out and to just be open that it does change.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask the question that I found very helpful in figuring that out, so I wanted to get your input
Yeah.
on we thought of that. And the question was, when should someone seek out your services? And I got in asked that on a podcast out of the blue. So I was like,
Yeah.
And it really got me thinking.
So say that one more time so I can repeat
Yeah.
it.
So the question was, in figuring out your ideal client, the question was, when should someone seek you out and seek out your services?
Okay. So if you couldn't hear that, it's when should someone seek you out and seek your services? Ooh, that is so good.
The perspective totally changed as
Yeah.
opposed to me seeking out clients. When would someone be aligned in one?
That is so good,
So
Lori.
that was really helpful, and I just
Yeah.
wanted to.
Thank you for
repeat that.
sharing.
Yeah,
That's
that's true.
that's a really, really good idea. I
Yeah.
like that.
No, I think that's solid. Question?
Yes, it is a question.
Great.
So, okay, one of the things I think about emotional intelligence is like that's for yourself is the hardest part
Yeah.
because you can I was thinking about asking the employee, like, tell me more about that. Like, if you're annoyed or you're like frustrated, like it's very hard to be present
To
there.
emotionally regulate.
Or like even this, I'm just like, this guy thinks everyone makes decisions on data, like that annoys me to my core. Like, are you crazy? Do you know how humans operate? And so I'm just like interested, like I know you said therapy and coaching, but I'm also interested like in because that to me, if I don't have that, like I know what it looks like to be in a good relationship, but like if I'm triggered or something.
I was gonna
gets
say,
me,
that's what the question is.
Yeah.
What she's basically asking is, how do I manage my triggers? Because
Yeah.
when you're
Because you don't know what they are.
yeah, but it's gonna happen. It's like, how do you emotionally regulate?
Yeah.
So when we're our best self, we can do all
Sure.
this stuff. But
Yeah.
Tell me more about
Yeah.
that.
but how often do we get triggered and we're not in our best place? And then how do we navigate that as a leader when we're barely holding on?
Yep. So when we are feeling triggered, which is a very normal human experience, it's almost always that there is some limiting belief that we have about ourselves that is being festered in that moment. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. I went to a very competitive all-girls high school with like 17 valedictorians, and with a 3.73, I feel like the biggest idiot in the world. And I always felt like I'm not smart enough. So let's say I'm on a phone call with a client and they say something like, well, really, if you just read the instruction manual, you would know what to do, right? Immediately, I get a knee-jerk reaction like, well, you're a jerk. Thanks for being a jerk. I'm sorry, but and so, but I'm like, really, Margie, what's going on here? Like, it didn't feel good hearing that from that person. You felt like they were talking down to you, like you weren't smart enough and you're feeling triggered. And that makes sense. So what would a person who loves themselves do in this situation? What would a friend who loves you say to you in this situation? And then you can literally coach yourself through it. So almost always we have these, false beliefs about ourselves that get in the way. Another really, really good resource I would recommend is Googling Byron Katie 4 questions. BYRON Katie. The work of Byron Katie, she has 4 questions, and they are something to the effect of, is this true? How do I know it's true? Who would I be without this belief, right? So it takes you through this process of asking yourself, like, is actually what's going on true, that this person doesn't like me and they don't want to work with me anymore? Like, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
This is a great client. You have a great relationship with them, and it allows you to talk yourself off the ledge.
Well, and I think what's so important about what she's saying is when we're in that moment of triggered, we're outwardly focused.
Right.
That person's annoying. This is happening. For me, I get very.
Yes, it is true.
It's never 100% true.
It very rarely
It
is.
is external factors that are external factors, and there are external factors happening.
Right.
But in terms of your emotional reaction, it's happening for internal reasons and the story you're telling yourself.
Because some days it won't matter.
No, exactly. So they talk a lot about emotional sobriety, and it's a term I've heard more recently. And it talks a lot about the space between something happening and your reaction. And for a lot of us, that space is like this, right? But emotional sobriety, it has to do with the bigger space you can create and creating pause or creating time or whatever it is so that you have these practices.
Yep.
You know, these 4 questions or taking a breath, whatever those things are, to create that inward look about, you know, what's going on with me internally and how can I make this situation better? Because my good old counselor who's straight in my life, that the hardest thing was learning, I can't control anyone else. I can't control anyone else, and I can't control. And if COVID hasn't taught us anything, like the illusion of control has been completely ripped out. It's not just people, it's the world, it's our life. And so if you can learn and appreciate that the only person I can control is me and my reactions.
So much more empowering.
So much more empowering. And it's not easy to do. It's a practice.
And that is what that practice is called, is self-compassion. Technically, right? And Kristen Neff, NEFF, is kind of like the godfather of research on self-compassion and self-soothing. And what we tend to do is what's called numbing. And numbing is pushing out any of that discomfort, whether it's social media scrolling, working too much, binge watching Netflix, drinking too much wine, whatever it is that we do to not. It's like when I see the list of numbing, I'm like, it's a bingo card.
Also, have a good time.
So it's really important to like get to that practice of saying, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I want to do this. But what would happen if for 2 minutes I just sat with this uncomfortable feeling and seeing what's going on with me? And I did that last night because my partner said something that really ticked me off. And I later I got in bed and I said, hey, you just moved in a couple weeks ago, and organizing stuff in homes is not my thing. And it would mean so much to me if you could give me a little grace that the house is messier right now than you'd like it. I just need you to be gentle with me. And it took me like a 5-minute break before I said that, because if I had said it at the point of when it happened, I would have probably snapped at him or done something that doesn't benefit anyone.
That's very,
You know?
that's very emotionally intelligent.
Yes.
No, I had to like get my hands on, brush my teeth, so I like.
Yeah, and it's a practice. Well, to honor, the teacher in me is wanting to honor time before Anna Marie's wanting, okay, we're good. Well, I just want to say thank you, Margie.
Of course.
This conversation was
So much fun.
so good. I feel like we could talk for hours, and obviously there's a good discussion starting to happen. So I do encourage you to stick around. I hope you don't think that I didn't think what you were saying was relevant, valid, awesome. I just am worried about the experience here as well. I'm just trying to be cognizant of that. And thank you for coming. Let's see. The next programming, Anna Marie's going to tell you a little something about it because I won't be able to pull it off.
It's next Thursday, it's gonna be in St. Louis. Gosh, I can't remember.
Well, let's go to the next one in live in Denver.
Yeah, that's gonna be Melissa Lemieux. She's talking about 3 things I wish I knew when I hired my first employee.
Oh, yes.
And that's gonna be here in person, Thursday the 22nd at noon.
Cool.
And you know, when Melissa and I were talking, Melissa's a wealth of information and so impressive. You know, one of my concerns or fears is I know a lot of our members don't have employees, right? So I didn't want you guys we didn't want to do a topic where you'd be like, that's not for me, I'm not showing up.
Right.
But I do think if I could go back in time, if I had heard and learned the things she's going to talk about before I was ready, because look, if you want to grow your company, you're either going to have independent contractors or employees in one way, shape, or form. Doing a company alone, one person, is just not, in my opinion, sustainable. So I think she's going to bring a lot of value to the table, and so I really hope that you guys come on back on that. Yes. Yeah, and just thank you guys for coming, and it's always fun. I was obviously in kind of a weird place walking in the door, but I always leave so fired up by just being surrounded by smart, awesome women that are having like really real conversations about things that we all can relate to. So thank you for being you guys, and have a wonderful rest of your Monday.